If your stepmother beats you black and blue just because you asked a single question about your birth mother, you stop believing it is just family stress. The only person who ever believed me was my grandfather, and he died trying to call me from a nursing home I was never permitted to visit. I thought he took the truth to his grave until I opened the folder he hid. That woman stole my mother's entire life. My name is Riley Hart, and I had been dreading this drive for 3 weeks. The road to the suburbs, just outside Portland, Maine, was a ribbon of gray asphalt winding through trees that had already lost their leaves, leaving the branches looking like skeletal fingers scratching at the darkening sky. It was late October, and the air had that biting chill that promised a long, hard winter. I gripped the steering wheel of my 10-year-old sedan, my knuckles turning white, trying to regulate my breathing. I was 32 years old, living on my own, paying my own bills, yet the mere thought of pulling into that driveway reduced me to a frightened teenager all over again. I told myself this was just dinner, just a simple family meal because Dad had called and sounded so pathetic on the phone, begging me to come over because it had been too long, but nothing with Monica was ever simple. When I pulled up to the house, the first thing I noticed was the perfection. It was unsettling. The lawn was manicured to a military precision. The windows gleamed under the porch lights. It did not look like the home I grew up in, the one that used to have bicycles leaning against the garage and a slightly peeling front door. This looked like a stage set. It looked like a house designed to convince the neighbors that the people living inside were happy, prosperous, and morally superior. I walked up the steps, my boots clicking loudly on the wood. Before I could even knock, the door swung open. Monica stood there, my stepmother. She was wearing a beige cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and her smile was so tight it looked painful. "Riley," she exclaimed, her voice pitching up an octave too high. "We were worried you would get lost. It has been so long since you bothered to come see us." I stepped inside, the warmth of the house hitting me like a physical wall. The smell was overwhelming. Roast beef, rosemary, and expensive furniture polish. "Hello." "Monica," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi, Dad?" My father, Tom, emerged from the living room. He looked older than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped, and he wore that perpetual expression of someone trying to avoid a sudden noise. He gave me a quick, one-armed hug, patting my back awkwardly. "Good to see you, kiddo," he mumbled, his eyes darting to Monica as if checking for permission to speak. "Come on, dinner is on the table," Monica commanded, turning on her heel. "We are not waiting. The roast will get dry." I followed them into the dining room, and that was when I stopped dead in my tracks. The room had been redone. New curtains, heavy and floral, blocked out the night. A massive centerpiece of fresh lilies took up half the table, but it was the new piece of furniture against the far wall that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was a glass-fronted display cabinet, dark mahogany, looking heavy and imposing. It was not filled with china or crystal glasses like a normal dining hutch. The shelves were lined with stacks of file folders, manila folders, accordion files, thick binders, and right in the center of the glass doors, gleaming under the chandelier light, was a heavy brass lock. "Who puts a locked filing cabinet in their dining room?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Monica pulled out her chair, the legs scraping harsh against the hardwood. "It is for organization." "Riley," she said, her tone clipping the end of my name. "Since your father has been having trouble keeping track of things, I have had to take over the administration of the household. It is safer to keep everything central, locked away from prying eyes." I sat down. The roast beef sat on a silver platter, oozing juice, but my stomach turned over. I looked at my father. He was staring at his empty plate, fingering the stem of his wine glass. We started eating in a silence that felt heavy enough to choke on. The only sounds were the clinking of silverware and Monica's heavy breathing. She ate aggressively, slicing her meat with unnecessary force. "So," Monica began, not looking at me, "I assume you are still working at that warehouse?" "Logistics company," I corrected. "And yes, I am the shift supervisor now." Supervisor, she scoffed. Well, I suppose it pays the rent. Though I told your father, with inflation being at 8% this year, I do not know how young people survive without family help. Of course, some children appreciate the sacrifices made for them more than others.
Here we go. The opening salvo.
I took a sip of water. I am doing fine. Monica. Are you? She looked up, her eyes hard and beady. Because we have had to tighten our belts, with your father's retirement account taking a hit, and the cost of maintaining this big house. It is not easy. We sacrifice every day to keep this family legacy intact. But you would not know anything about sacrifice. Would you? You just come here, eat our food, and leave for another 6 months. I gripped my fork. Dad, say something. Tom cleared his throat. Now, Monica, let's have a nice dinner. Riley drove 2 hours to get here. She drove 2 hours because she wants something. Monica snapped. They always want something. I put my fork down. The metal clattered against the china. I felt a cold heat rising in my chest. It was the same feeling I had when I was 13, watching her throw my mother's clothes into black garbage bags. I do not want anything from you. Monica, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Actually, that is not true. I do want something. I want an answer. The room went deadly silent. Even the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to stop ticking. Monica narrowed her eyes. Excuse me? I looked at my father, then back at her. I asked a question that had been festering in my gut for 3 years. A question I had been too cowardly to ask while Grandpa Walt was alive because I did not want to cause a scene. But Grandpa was gone now. He died alone in a nursing home while I was kept away, and I was done with the silence. I want to know about Mom's life insurance. I said, the policy was worth $500,000. And Grandpa Walt's house, he owned it outright. It sold for $450,000 2 months after he died. You said the money was gone. You said it was used for debts. But I checked the public records. Monica, Grandpa had no debts. So I am asking you, really asking you, where did the money go? For 3 seconds, nobody moved. It was as if I had pulled a pin on a grenade and set it on the table between the mashed potatoes and the green beans. Monica's face went through a terrifying transformation. The mask of the long-suffering martyr stepmother cracked and fell away. Underneath, there was something feral. Her face flushed a deep, blotchy red.
You ungrateful little brat, she hissed.
Riley, please, my father whispered, his face draining of color. Don't dig this up. Not now. Everything I have done, Monica shouted, slamming her hand on the table, making the wine glasses jump, has been for this family. You think you know? You think you know what it costs to clean up the mess your mother left? The mess your grandfather left? He was a senile old fool who would have lost everything if I hadn't stepped in. She was lying. I could see it in the frantic twitch of her eye. I looked past her, my gaze drawn magnetically back to that cabinet, that strange, locked cabinet in the dining room. The light from the chandelier hit the glass at a different angle now, illuminating the labels on the folders inside. My eyes scanned them. Taxes, medical, house deed. And then I saw it. On the bottom shelf, jammed between 2 thick binders, was a worn brown manila envelope. It was thicker than the rest, and written on the spine, in shaky, black marker, unmistakably my grandfather's handwriting, were words that made my heart stop. For Riley, only open if they turn on you. The air left my lungs. Grandpa Walt, he knew. He had known something was going to happen. I stood up. My chair screeched backward, toppling over with a crash. What is in the cabinet? Monica? I asked, pointing a trembling finger at the glass. Monica's head whipped around. She saw where I was looking. Panic, sharp and immediate, flared in her eyes. Sit down, she screamed. I moved toward the cabinet. That is Grandpa's handwriting. It has my name on it. I have a right to see it. No, you have no rights in this house. I took 2 steps, reaching for the handle of the cabinet, hoping against hope it was unlocked. Monica moved faster than I thought possible for a woman of her size. She launched herself out of her chair, scrambling around the table to cut me off. She planted herself between me and the cabinet, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. "Get back," she spat. "You get out of my house." "Give me the folder." "Monica," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, anchored by a sudden, icy clarity, the one that says my name. "Why do you have a folder addressed to me locked in your display case?" She didn't answer with words. She shoved me. It wasn't a little push. She lunged forward with both hands. Slamming them into my chest, I stumbled back, my boots slipping on the polished hardwood. "You are trying to rob us," she shrieked. "You are a thief, just like your mother, trying to steal what isn't yours." The mention of my mother snapped the last thread of my control. I stepped forward again, shouting, "My mother wasn't a thief. She built this family. You are the one living off her money." Monica grabbed the first thing her hand touched on the table. It was the heavy stainless steel ladle from the gravy boat. Before I could react, she swung it. The metal struck the side of my head with a sickening crack. A burst of white light exploded behind my eyes. The pain was immediate and searing, sharp enough to make my knees buckle. Warm liquid trickled down my temple. Gravy or blood? I didn't know. She didn't stop. The ladle clattered to the floor, and she came at me with her fists. She was drunk on rage, drunk on the wine she had been guzzling, and drunk on years of resentment. She slapped me, a hard, stinging blow across the cheek that snapped my head to the side. Then a punch, clumsy but heavy, landing on my shoulder. I tried to raise my hands to defend myself, but I was shocked, disoriented by the blow to the head. I tripped over my own feet and went down hard, my hips slamming against the floorboards. Monica stood over me, panting, her hair wild, her face twisted into a snarl. "You get nothing!" she screamed down at me. "Do you hear me? Nothing!" "Dad!" I gasped, looking past her legs to where my father still sat at the table. He was trembling, staring at his plate, his hands gripping the tablecloth so hard his knuckles were yellow. "Dad, help me!" He didn't move. He didn't look up. He just closed his eyes. I looked back at Monica. She realized I wasn't getting up immediately. She turned her back on me and frantically fumbled with a key she pulled from her pocket. Her hands were shaking so bad she scratched the wood, but she jammed the key into the cabinet lock. Click. She threw the door open. She didn't grab the tax returns. She didn't grab the deed. She went straight for the bottom shelf. She ripped the brown envelope out, the one labeled for Riley, clutching it to her chest like it was the Holy Grail. I tried to push myself up. "That is mine," I wheezed. Monica spun around, looking at me with pure hatred. She marched over to her purse, which was sitting on the sideboard, and shoved the folder deep inside, zipping it shut. "You are leaving," she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "And if you ever come back, I will call the police and tell them you attacked me. Look at you. Look at this mess. Who are they going to believe? The successful homeowners? Or the hysterical daughter who broke into our house demanding money?" I lay there on the cold wood floor, the side of my face throbbing in time with my heartbeat. My vision was swimming, blurring at the edges. I tasted copper in my mouth, but through the pain, one thought crystallized in my mind, sharp and undeniable. It wasn't just family stress. It wasn't just greed. She was terrified. She had just assaulted me, in front of a witness, to keep me from seeing what was inside that folder, which meant whatever was in there was worth more than her reputation. It was worth more than her freedom. I looked at her purse, bulging with the thick brown envelope. She hadn't just stolen my childhood. She hadn't just stolen my mother's money. She was hiding a body, metaphorically speaking, and Grandpa Walt had left me the shovel to dig it up. I groaned, rolling onto my side, clutching my throbbing head. I needed to get out. I needed to survive tonight, because now I knew the truth. This was not a family dispute. This was war. The fluorescent lights in the emergency room hummed with a sound that felt like a drill boring directly into my temple. It was a high-pitched, electric buzz that seemed to vibrate against the white linoleum floors and the pale blue curtains separating the beds. I sat on the edge of the examination table, my legs dangling, swinging slightly just to give my body something to do. My hands were gripping the edge of the mattress so hard that my fingers had gone numb. A nurse, a woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders named Sarah, was gently tilting my chin up. Her fingers were cool against my burning skin. She made a sympathetic noise in her throat as she inspected the side of my face where the ladle had connected. "It looks worse than it is," I said, the words tumbling out of my mouth in a rush. I flinched as she touched a particularly tender spot near my hairline. "Just a clumsy accident at dinner. We were arguing. Things got heated. It is just a family dispute." I was reciting the script. I had been reciting versions of this script for nearly 20 years. It was the automatic defense mechanism of the Hart household. Deny, minimize, protect the reputation. Even now, with my head throbbing and a bruise darkening on my arm that looked like a thundercloud, I was still trying to protect them. Sarah didn't say anything immediately. She picked up a clipboard and began writing, the scratch of her pen loud in the small cubicle. She paused, looking at the purple marks on my upper arm where Monica had grabbed me, and then at the swelling on my cheek. "Riley," she said softly, not looking up from her paper. "Has this happened before?" The question hung in the antiseptic air, heavy and suffocating. Has this happened before? Physically? No, Monica had never struck me with a kitchen utensil before. She had never thrown a punch, but violence is not always kinetic. Sometimes violence is a slow erosion, a tectonic shift that destroys your foundation without making a sound until the house collapses. The question pulled me back. The white curtain of the ER faded, replaced by the memory of the first time Monica walked into our house with suitcases. I was 13 years old. It was only 4 months after the funeral. The house still smelled like my mother, her lavender laundry detergent, her vanilla candles. But Monica arrived like a weather system, sweeping through the rooms with a terrifying efficiency. She didn't scream or hit. She just replaced. I remembered coming home from school one Tuesday to find our living room transformed. The soft, overstuffed floral sofa my mother had loved, the one we used to build forts with on rainy days, was gone. In its place sat a stiff, beige leather sectional that squeaked when you sat on it and felt cold against bare skin. We needed a fresh start, Monica had declared, standing in the middle of the room with her hands on her hips, surveying her conquest. That old thing was a dust trap. It was unhygienic. She called my mother's memory unhygienic. I looked at my father, waiting for him to shout, to tell her to bring back Mom's couch. He just stood there, looking hollowed out, nodding slowly like a bobblehead doll. That was the first bruise. The bruise on my heart when I realized he wasn't going to fight for us. The memory shifted, darker and sharper. I was in the backyard, crouching behind the rhododendron bushes, clutching a library book I wasn't reading. The window to the kitchen was open. I heard voices, loud ones. It was Grandpa Walt. He was the only one who ever raised his voice at her. "You are moving too fast." "Monica," Grandpa had growled. His voice was gravel and iron. "It has not even been 6 months. Why are you changing the names on the utility bills? Why are you asking Tom for power of attorney?" "It is for efficiency." "Walt," Monica's voice had replied, smooth as poisoned honey. "Tom is grieving. He cannot handle the paperwork. I am taking the burden off his shoulders. I am sacrificing my time to make sure this family doesn't go under." "You are burying him in paperwork he doesn't understand." Grandpa snapped back. "And what about the girl? What about Riley? That insurance policy was meant for her education. Tom said you moved it into a joint account." "It is safer there," Monica said, and I could hear the sneer in her tone even through the brick wall. "We need to be liquid. Emergencies happen. You should be thanking me." I stayed behind the bushes until the sun went down and the mosquitoes started biting, feeling a cold knot of dread form in my stomach. That was the second bruise, the realization that I was a financial variable, not a daughter. The scene changed again in my mind, dissolving into a memory from when I was 15. I was sitting at the top of the stairs, hugging my knees. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning. The house was dark. but the light from the study downstairs spilled into the hallway. Monica was on the phone. She thought everyone was asleep. I do not care what the solicitor said. She was hissing into the receiver. I am the wife. I am the guardian. The insurance payout is mine to manage. There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. No, Monica interrupted, her voice rising in agitation. You do not tell her. She is 15. She is irresponsible. If she knows there is $50,000 sitting there, she will just blow it on nonsense. She is reckless, just like her mother was. I am doing this to protect her from herself. I remember pressing my face against the banister, the wood hard against my cheek. Irresponsible, reckless. I was a straight-A student. I worked weekends at the diner. I saved every penny I made. But she was rewriting the narrative. She was painting a picture of a delinquent to justify theft. She was stealing my character so she could steal my future. Then came the disappearances. It started small. A framed photo of my mother on the mantelpiece was moved to the bookshelf, then to the drawer. Then it was just gone. Where is the picture of Mom? I asked one day. Oh, the frame broke, Monica said breezily, not looking up from her magazine. I threw it out. It was dangerous. Glass everywhere. Then it was the jewelry. My mother's gold locket, the one with the tiny diamond chip. I came home to find her jewelry box emptied out, the velvet lining stark and bare. We had a break-in scare in the neighborhood, Monica told me, her eyes wide with fake concern. I took the valuables to a safety deposit box at the bank. For safekeeping. You will get them when you are older. I never saw that locket again. And finally, the desk. My mother's writing desk in the corner of the guest room. It was where she wrote her letters, where she paid bills, where she kept her journals. I came home from a weekend camping trip to find the corner empty. The carpet still held the indentations of the legs. 4 little ghosts marking where history had stood. We are decluttering, Monica said. We need space for the rowing machine. Nobody used that desk anyway. She erased my mother not with a singular act of destruction, but with 1,000 tiny removals. She edited our lives until the only version of the story left was the one where Monica was the savior and we were the burden. The sharpest memory cut through the haze of the ER like a knife. My 16th birthday. It was a rushed, chaotic affair because Monica had booked a spa day for herself and insisted we do cake at 10 in the morning so she wouldn't be late. Grandpa Walt had pulled me aside while Monica was honking the horn in the driveway, screaming that we were burning daylight. He looked older then, frail. His hands shook a little. He pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm. It was a $20 bill wrapped around a scrap of notebook paper with a phone number on it. Listen to me. Riley, he whispered, his breath smelling of peppermint and old tobacco. If it gets bad, if it ever gets really bad, you call me. You do not call them. You call me. He looked at the door where Monica was yelling. She is a storm. Riley, you keep your head down until you are strong enough to walk out, but do not let her convince you that you are crazy. You hear me? You are not the crazy one. Riley, Monica shrieked from the car. Grandpa squeezed my hand one last time, his eyes fierce and sad. Go, but keep that number. I snapped back to the present. The hum of the hospital lights seemed louder now. Sarah, the nurse, was standing there with a camera, a small digital camera, the kind they used for documentation. Riley, she asked gently, I need to take photos of the injuries, for your file, just in case. Just in case. I nodded slowly. I understood what she meant. Just in case I decided to stop lying. Just in case the law needed to see what family love looked like in the Hart household. She raised the camera. Flash. The blinding white light hit my face. I blinked, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. Turn your arm, please, she instructed. Flash. The bruise on my arm. The fingerprint marks where Monica had dug her nails in. Flash. The cut on my temple where the ladle had split the skin. Each flash felt like an exposure. For years, the abuse had been psychological. Missing money, gaslighting, emotional manipulation. It was invisible. You cannot photograph a stolen inheritance. You cannot take a picture of a stepmother whispering poison into your father's ear. But this was undeniable. This was ink on paper. This was evidence. Monica had made a mistake. She had let her mask slip so far that it left a physical imprint. "You are all set," Sarah said, lowering the camera. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "Here is your discharge paperwork. I have included a prescription for some painkillers. And Riley? There is a brochure in there for domestic resources, if you need it." I took the folder. It was yellow, not brown like the one in the cabinet, but it felt just as heavy. "Thank you," I whispered. Walking out of the hospital was surreal. The automatic doors slid open, and the cold Maine air hit me, biting at my exposed skin. It was raining, a freezing drizzle that coated everything in a sleek black sheen. I walked to my car, my boots splashing in the puddles, my reflection caught in the driver's side window. I looked like a ghost. My hair was matted with dried blood on one side. My cheek was swollen and discolored, and my eyes looked haunted. I touched the glass, tracing the outline of my own battered face. I had spent my entire life trying to be invisible so Monica wouldn't target me. I had tried to be the good girl, the quiet girl, the girl who didn't ask questions about the insurance or the house or the jewelry. I thought if I made myself small enough, the monster would pass me over. But tonight, I had asked. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors, the sound of the tumblers falling into place echoing loud in the small cabin. I didn't start the engine immediately. I just sat there, listening to the rain drum against the roof. The beating wasn't about the question I asked tonight. It wasn't about the life insurance or the house sale. Monica hadn't hit me because I asked a question. She hit me because I had almost found the answer. She hit me because she knew that the moment I opened that brown folder, her narrative would crumble. She wasn't protecting the family. She was protecting a crime scene. I looked at my hands resting on the steering wheel. They were shaking, but not from fear anymore. They were shaking with adrenaline. Grandpa Walt had told me to call him if it got bad. He was gone now. He couldn't answer the phone, but he had left me a voicemail of a different kind. He had left me that folder. I put the key in the ignition and turned it. The engine roared to life, cutting through the silence of the parking lot. I wasn't going back to that house to apologize. I wasn't going to beg for forgiveness for ruining her dinner party. I shifted the car into reverse. The headlights swept across the wet pavement, illuminating the dark road ahead. "You made a mistake, Monica," I said aloud to the empty car. My voice was raspy, but it was steady. "You left a mark." And now, I was going to make sure the world saw it. My apartment was quiet. It was the kind of silence that usually felt like a sanctuary, a safe harbor after a long shift at the logistics center. But tonight, the silence felt heavy, pressing against my eardrums, amplified by the throbbing ache in my temple where the ladle had struck me. I locked the deadbolt, then the chain, then leaned my forehead against the cool metal of the door, breathing in the scent of my own home, stale coffee and lemon cleaner. It was a world away from the potpourri and polish of Monica's house, but for the first time, my sanctuary felt insufficient. The violence had followed me home. I limped to the couch and sat down, not bothering to turn on the main lights. The street lamps outside cast long, distorted shadows across the floor. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen was cracked at the corner, a spiderweb fracture that distorted the time. It was just past 11 at night. My finger hovered over the voicemail icon. For the last year, I had avoided this folder on my phone. It was the saved messages archive. I kept them because I was sentimental, or maybe because I was punishing myself. Tonight, I needed to hear him. I needed to know that the man who had written for Riley on that folder was the man I remembered, not the senile invalid Monica had painted him to be in his final days. I pressed play on the first message. It was dated 14 months ago. "Riley? It is Grandpa." His voice sounded thin, reedy, like wind whistling through dry grass. "It is Sunday. The nurse said it is Sunday. I thought you were coming by. I waited in the lobby. Maybe I got the day wrong. Call me back, sweetheart. A lump formed in my throat, hard and painful. I remembered that Sunday. I had called the house landline at 9 in the morning to say I was coming. Monica had answered. She had told me, in a hushed, conspiratorial whisper, that Grandpa was having a bad day, that he was aggressive and confused, and that seeing me would only upset him. She said he was sedated. She said, stay away for his own good. Riley. I played the next one. Dated 2 months later. Riley? It is Grandpa again. I haven't heard from you. Monica says you are busy with work. She says you got a promotion. That is good. I wanted to ask you about the fishing rod. The old one. I wanted to make sure you have it. Call me. I squeezed my eyes shut, hot tears leaking out and stinging the cuts on my face. I never got a promotion that month. I was working double shifts just to make rent. And I had called. I called every week, every single time. Monica or my father intercepted the call. He is sleeping. He is eating. He doesn't remember who you are today. Riley, it is heartbreaking. Don't put yourself through it. They had built a wall made of lies and fake concern. They had isolated him in that nursing home, cutting the phone lines of his life one by one, until he thought I had abandoned him. And they had isolated me, convincing me that he was too far gone to be reached. The cruelty of it washed over me, colder than the rain outside. It wasn't just about money. It was about stealing the last year of a relationship. Monica had robbed me of his lucid moments so she could control the narrative. If we didn't talk, we couldn't compare notes. If we didn't talk, he couldn't tell me about the folder. I scrolled to the very bottom, to the last interaction I had regarding Grandpa Walt. It wasn't a voicemail. It was a text message from my father. It was dated 8 months ago. Dad passed this morning. Peaceful. Funeral Tuesday. We handled it. Love, Dad. I stared at the text. 12 words. A life of 80 years reduced to 12 words sent while I was likely scanning invoices at the warehouse. I remembered the panic of that day. I had called immediately, sobbing, asking for details. Monica had taken the phone. Her voice was clipped, efficient, the voice of a project manager dealing with a minor setback. We are keeping it small. Riley, she had said, just family, no big service. He didn't want a fuss, and honestly, there is no money for a fuss. That was the refrain. No money. At the funeral, which was a hurried affair at a generic chapel near the cemetery, Monica had worn a black dress that looked brand new and far too expensive for someone claiming poverty. She had cried into a lace handkerchief, accepting condolences from neighbors she barely knew. When I asked about the will, about the legalities, she had waved her hand dismissively. Oh, honey, don't worry your pretty head about that, she had said, patting my arm with a condescension that made my skin crawl. Walt died penniless. Actually, worse than penniless. The medical bills from the facility ate everything. The house was underwater with a second mortgage. Your father and I are absorbing the debt. We are handling the mess so you don't have to. I had believed her. Why wouldn't I? I knew nursing homes were expensive. I knew end-of-life care could drain a fortune. I had felt guilty that I couldn't contribute, grateful that they were shielding me from the financial fallout. But tonight, sitting in the dark with my bruised face, the logic fell apart. If he died with nothing but debt, why was Monica so terrified of that folder? If the house was underwater, why did she repaint it and buy new furniture? If there was nothing to inherit, why did she scream that I was trying to rob them? People do not fight tooth and nail over a deficit. They do not assault their stepdaughters with kitchen ladles to protect a stack of unpaid bills. I opened my laptop. The screen flared to life, illuminating the small kitchen table. My fingers flew across the keyboard, driven by a new, frantic energy. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was suspicious. I navigated to the state judiciary website. Probate court records were public information. I had learned that from a friend years ago, but I had never thought to look. I had trusted my father. I had trusted the lie. I typed in the search bar, Hayes, Walter. The little loading circle spun, round and round, my heart hammered against my ribs. A result popped up. Estate of Walter J. Hayes. Case number PR 2024-0492. Status: open.
I clicked on the case file. My eyes scanned the summary: date of death, date of filing, executor, Monica Hart.
And then, down in the section labeled Beneficiaries listed in petition. My breath caught in my throat. Thomas Hart, Monica Hart, Riley Hart. My name was there. I was listed as a beneficiary. I sat back, the plastic chair creaking under me. If the estate was insolvent, if there was zero assets and only debt, why list beneficiaries? And why, if I was listed legally, had nobody contacted me? No lawyer, no court clerk. Unless Monica had filed the paperwork claiming she couldn't locate me, or that I had waived my rights. I looked closer at the document summary. The initial filing value of the estate was listed as under $50,000. That seemed low for a house in Portland, even a small one, but then I saw a notation about a small estate affidavit. My mind raced. Monica had told me the house was sold to pay debts, but if the estate was under $50,000, that meant the house wasn't included in the probate, which meant she had found a way to transfer the house before he died, or immediately after. I closed my eyes, and a memory surfaced, not from the funeral, but from years ago. I was 10 years old. Grandpa was in his workshop in the garage, showing me how to fix a bicycle chain. He was greasing the gears, his hands stained black with oil. "Riley," he had said, wiping his hands on a rag, "you know the best place to hide something valuable?" "In a safe?" I had guessed. He had laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "No, safes are the first place people look. Thieves look for locks. If you want to hide something, you put it where people look every day but never actually see. You put it in a box of cornflakes. You tape it to the back of the toilet tank. You put it inside a book nobody reads. The art of hiding is making the secret look boring." I opened my eyes. The cabinet in the dining room, it was glass-fronted. It was right there, visible to everyone who sat at the table. She had put the files there because she was arrogant, yes, but also because she wanted them close. She wanted to keep an eye on her victory. But Grandpa knew her. For Riley, only open if they turn on you. He hadn't written that note for Monica to find. He had written it anticipating that she would find it. Or perhaps he had planted it there? No, that didn't make sense. Monica had the folder. She had taken it. But what if the folder in the cabinet wasn't the only thing? What if the folder was the decoy? Or what if the folder was the trigger? I looked at the probate website again. Status: open. If there was a will that listed me, and Monica was suppressing it, she was committing a felony. If she had coerced him into signing a new will when he was confused and sedated, that was fraud. And if Grandpa Walt had known, if he had truly known what she was capable of, he wouldn't have left his only defense in a glass cabinet in the enemy's dining room. He would have left a backup. If it gets bad, call me. I looked at the phone again, the voicemail from 14 months ago. I wanted to ask you about the fishing rod. The old one. I wanted to make sure you have it. The fishing rod. I froze. I hadn't fished since I was 12. But when I moved out at 18, when Monica was practically throwing my boxes onto the curb, Grandpa had handed me his old tackle box and a broken-down rod in a canvas case. "Take this," he had said, looking at Monica to make sure she wasn't listening. "You never know when you might want to catch something." I had thrown it in the back of my closet and forgotten about it. It had moved with me to 3 different apartments, a dusty, useless relic of a hobby I didn't have. Why would he leave a voicemail specifically asking if I still had a broken fishing rod? A chill went down my spine, but this time it wasn't fear. It was realization. It was the click of a puzzle piece snapping into place. He wasn't senile. He wasn't confused. He was speaking in code. He was trying to tell me where the real information was. He knew his calls were being monitored, or that he had limited time. I stood up, ignoring the dizziness that swayed the room. I went to the hallway closet. I shoved aside the winter coats. the vacuum cleaner, the old boots. There, in the back corner, wedged behind a box of Christmas ornaments, was the canvas case. It was covered in gray dust. I reached for it, my hands trembling. Monica had the folder from the cabinet. She thought she had won. She thought she had secured the perimeter and silenced the opposition. She thought she had beaten me, literally and metaphorically. But she didn't know about the voicemail. She didn't know that while she was busy intercepting calls and rewriting wills, Grandpa Walt had been playing a longer game. I grabbed the case and pulled it into the light. I wasn't just a victim of a bad stepmother anymore. I wasn't just the sad girl with the dead mother and the spineless father. I was the granddaughter of Walter Hayes, and I was finally ready to listen to what he had been trying to tell me for years. The anger in my chest tightened, condensing from a cloud of hurt into a diamond-hard point of resolve. Let her have the dining room cabinet. Let her have the fake will. I had the fishing rod, and tomorrow, I was going to see what I could catch. The adrenaline from finding the fishing rod case was still humming in my veins, a low-frequency vibration that made my hands shake, but I forced myself to leave it on the table. Grandpa Walt had played the long game, and I needed to do the same. Before I could understand what he had hidden for me, I needed to understand exactly what Monica had done to me. I turned my attention to the top of my refrigerator. There, pushed back against the wall and covered in a layer of greasy dust, was an old Nike shoebox. I had been ignoring that box for 6 months. Working the floor at Northbridge Relay Systems was not just a job. It was a physical dismantling of the spirit. I would clock in at 6 in the morning, spend 10 hours coordinating logistics for freight trucks, managing drivers who were perpetually late and manifests that were perpetually wrong, and by the time I dragged myself home, my brain was a static fuzz. I paid my rent. I paid my utilities, everything else, the solicitations, the weirdly thick envelopes from banks I didn't bank with, the notices that looked too official for my exhausted eyes. I shoved into the shoebox. I called it the later box. Tonight was later. I pulled the box down. It landed on the kitchen table with a heavy thud, stirring up dust motes that danced in the harsh light of the laptop screen. My temple throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat. I sat down and dumped the contents out. It was a chaotic pile of white, yellow, and pink envelopes. I picked up the first one. It was from a credit card company called VistaCorp. I had never heard of them. I sliced it open with a steak knife. Second notice of default. I frowned. My eyes scanned the lines. Outstanding balance, $4,212.16. I didn't have a VistaCorp card. I had one debit card from a local credit union and one emergency credit card with a $500 limit that I kept frozen in a block of ice in my freezer. Literally. So I wouldn't use it. I opened the next one, a department store card. Past due, $800. The next, a financing statement for a home improvement loan. Principal amount, $12,000. The pile on the table began to look less like trash and more like a crime scene. My breath started coming in short, shallow gasps. I grabbed a pen and a notepad. My movements jerky and mechanical. I started making a list. VistaCorp, Macy's, Home Depot. A personal loan from a fintech company I had seen advertised on late-night television. The total was climbing, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. I reached for my phone. It was past midnight, but the 1-800 number on the VistaCorp letter said, 24-hour customer service. I dialed, putting the phone on speaker so I could keep opening envelopes. A robotic voice guided me through a maze of menus until finally, a human voice came on the line. VistaCorp Security, this is Jason. How can I help you? I need to inquire about an account, I said, my voice sounding calm and detached, like I was discussing a shipment of pallets at work. I received a notice, but I do not have a card with you. Can I have the account number on the notice? I read it off. Can you verify the last 4 digits of your social security number? I hesitated. If this was fraud, giving them my info felt dangerous. But if the account was in my name, they already had it. I gave him the numbers. Thank you. Ms. Hart, Jason said. I see the account here. It was opened 14 months ago. The balance is currently $4,200. It is 90 days past due. We were preparing to send this to a collections agency. I didn't open this account. I said, I have never applied for a card with you. There was a typing sound on the other end. Well, the application was submitted online. It was verified with your social security number, date of birth, and previous address history. What is the billing address on file? I asked. I cannot give that out unless you verify it first. Is it? I took a breath. Is it 42 Maplewood Drive, Portland? That is correct, Jason said, and the phone number on file ends in 4492. The blood drained from my face so fast I felt dizzy. That was the landline at my father's house, the house I had just been kicked out of, the house where Monica had a locked cabinet. Okay, I said, staring at the wall. And were there any authorized users added to the card? Yes, one, a Monica Hart. The name hung in the air between us. Monica. I hung up without saying another word. I didn't need to hear Jason explain the dispute process yet. I needed to see the full scope of the infection. I went back to my laptop. My hands were shaking so bad I mistyped my password twice. I logged into a credit monitoring site, one of those free ones I had signed up for years ago and never checked because I assumed my credit was just boringly average. The dashboard loaded. My credit score flashed in big red numbers, 520. Below it, in a bright red banner, Alert, Delinquent Accounts. I clicked on the full report. It was a bloodbath. There were inquiries dating back years. The timeline was a perfect, damning graph of my adult life. The first inquiry appeared 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. I remembered that week. I was preparing to move out, terrified and clueless about the world. Monica had sat me down at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. We need to get your files in order. Riley, she had said, pushing a pen into my hand. Lease guarantees, student aid forms, tax setups. Just sign here, here, and here. I will handle the filing for you. You know how confusing the government makes these things. I had signed everything she put in front of me because I wanted to leave, and because I was 18 and trusted the adults in the room. That was the gateway. I scrolled down the list of accounts. There was a car loan for a vehicle I had never driven. It was paid off, which meant she was using my credit to boost her own leverage. Cycling debt to keep the scheme running. There were utility bills for a rental property in a town 3 hours away. And then, I saw the big one. A mortgage refinance loan, originated 6 months ago. Lender, Atlantic Regional Bank, amount $65,000. The collateral listed was the address of Grandpa Walt's old house. I stopped breathing. Grandpa died 8 months ago. Monica told me the house was sold immediately to pay debts. She said it was underwater. But this loan was taken out after he died, but before the house was allegedly sold. I dug through the pile of mail again, frantically tossing aside the credit card bills. I was looking for something specific now, a tax document. If there was real estate activity attached to my social security number, the IRS would know about it. I found it at the bottom of the box, a 1099-S form, proceeds from real estate transactions. It had been forwarded from my old address, Monica's address. She must have missed this one when she was intercepting my mail, or maybe she just got sloppy. Filer, estate of Walter Hayes. Transferor, Riley Hart. Gross proceeds, $450,000. I stared at the paper. The numbers blurred. $450,000. The document listed me, Riley Hart, as the transferor. That meant legally, on paper. The house had been transferred to me, and then I had sold it. But I had never signed a deed. I had never attended a closing. I had never seen a penny of $450,000. I looked at the sent to line on the form. Riley Hart, Geo Monica Hart. She had transferred the house to me, probably using a power of attorney I didn't know existed or by forging my signature, then sold it immediately, funneling the proceeds into an account she controlled, all while telling me the estate was bankrupt. And the worst part? The tax liability for that sale? The capital gains? That was on me. The IRS thought I had pocketed nearly $500,000. I pushed the chair back and stood up, pacing the small length of my kitchen. The physical pain in my face was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. This wasn't just a bad stepmother stealing a few trinkets. This was an industry. Monica had turned me into a ghost employee in her fraudulent enterprise. She had kept me poor, kept me working double shifts at Northbridge so I would be too tired to check my mail, too exhausted to question why I couldn't get approved for a car loan, too beaten down to fight back. She needed me to be the mess. She needed me to be the irresponsible daughter, so that when these debts eventually exploded, she could point to my low credit score, my lack of assets, and say, "See, poor Riley, she just couldn't manage her money. We tried to help." I was the shield. I was the scapegoat. I went back to the table and picked up the loan document from the bank, the one for the consolidation loan. I looked closely at the signature line at the bottom. It was an electronic signature, Riley Hart. And below it, a cosigner, Monica Hart. I called the bank listed on that form. It was 2 a.m. now, but the fraud line was automated. I navigated to the option for check status of application. I entered my social security number. "Please enter the PIN you established," the voice said. I didn't have a PIN. I tried my birthday. Incorrect. I tried the last 4 digits of my social. Incorrect. I closed my eyes and thought, what would Monica use? What was the code to the security system at her house? The one she punched in every night with aggressive precision? 1980, the year she married my father. I typed it in. Access granted. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. She hadn't even bothered to be creative. She was so confident in her control over me, so sure that I was too stupid or too cowed to ever check, that she used her own anniversary as the password to my financial ruin. I listened to the automated voice list, the recent transactions. Payment received, $2,000. Source, Tom and Monica joint checking. Withdrawal, $5,000. Destination, M. Hart LLC. She was washing money through my name, taking loans out in my name, paying them back with family money to build the credit limit, then pulling out larger sums and moving them to an LLC I had never heard of. I hung up the phone. I gathered the papers, the 1099-S, the default notices, the credit report printout, and spread them across the cheap laminate table. It looked like a map of a war zone. For years, I had internalized her voice. You are ungrateful. You are messy. You are a burden. I had believed her. I had thought my inability to get ahead was a character flaw. I thought my constant financial anxiety was just bad luck. But looking at this table, I realized it wasn't bad luck. It was math. I looked over at the canvas fishing rod case. If Monica was willing to do this, federal tax fraud, identity theft, grand larceny, then whatever was in that folder Grandpa hid wasn't just a will. A will was a civil matter. This was criminal. Grandpa Walt didn't just hide a document. He hid the key to a prison cell. And he hid it because he knew exactly who she was. He knew she wasn't just a greedy woman. He knew she was a parasite who had been feeding on us for decades. I walked over to the fishing rod case and unzipped it. The sound of the zipper was loud in the quiet apartment. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. You can't be afraid of a parasite once you see it under a microscope. You just want to extract it. I reached inside the case. It was time to see what weapon Grandpa had left me. I needed someone who understood the system, but I did not have the money for a retainer. Then I remembered Mara Jensen. Mara and I had worked the loading dock shifts together at Northbridge Relay Systems for 3 years. She was the one who taught me how to scan manifests without jamming the reader. 2 years ago, she had quit, gone back to school, and landed a job as a paralegal at a small firm downtown that specialized in estate planning and elder financial abuse. At the time, I thought it was a boring pivot. Now, it felt like divine intervention. I sent her a text at 7 a.m. By 8, she had replied, by noon. I was sitting across from her in a quiet coffee shop on Congress Street. the kind of place with exposed brick walls and indie music that felt a universe away from the chaos of my father's house. I looked terrible. The bruising on my face had blossomed into a vivid purple map of violence, and I had covered it poorly with drugstore concealer. Mara took one look at me, her eyes widening behind her tortoiseshell glasses. But she didn't ask. She just pushed her latte aside and cleared a space on the table. "Show me," she said. I laid it out, the tax form claiming I had sold a house I never owned, the credit card statements opened in my name, the printout of the probate summary, the notes I had scribbled down about the missing jewelry and the family sacrifice speeches. Mara read through them in silence. She was thorough. I watched her eyes track down the lines of the credit report, her brow furrowing deeper with every page. When she got to the 1099-S tax form, the one for $450,000, she stopped. She tapped her fingernail against the paper. "Riley," she said, her voice low and serious, "you know what this is, right? This is not just them being greedy. This is a federal crime. If the IRS thinks you have this money, and you haven't paid taxes on it, they are going to come for you, not Monica. You." "I know," I said, my voice steady despite the nausea churning in my stomach. "That is why I am here." She told me Grandpa died penniless. She told me the house was underwater. But this form says the proceeds went to the estate, care of Monica. Mara shook her head. "Probate files are public record. Riley, the online summary you saw is just the tip of the iceberg. It gives you the dates and the names, but it doesn't give you the texture. We need to see the actual documents. We need to see the will she filed." "Can you get them?" I asked. She nodded. "I can go to the county clerk's office on my lunch break tomorrow. I will pull the physical file. Sometimes, when people forge things, they get sloppy with the details. They think nobody is ever going to look at the paper hard copy." She gathered the papers back into a neat stack. "I will talk to my boss. Anthony. He is, well, he hates bullies, and he hates financial predators. If I find what I think I'm going to find, he will want to see you." I walked out of that coffee shop feeling a strange sensation. It wasn't relief, exactly. It was the feeling of having ground under my feet. For the first time, I wasn't just Riley the victim, I was Riley the client. The next 24 hours were agonizing. I went to work, keeping my head down, wearing a baseball cap to hide my face. I jumped every time my phone buzzed. It was 4 p.m. when Mara called. I was in the break room, staring at a vending machine. I answered on the first ring. "Riley," Mara said. Her voice sounded tight, breathless. "Are you somewhere you can talk?" "Yes," I said. "What did you find?" "I am looking at the file right now," she said. "Riley, there are 2 wills." My hand gripped the phone. 2? "There is an original will, dated 3 years ago," she explained. "It was drafted by a reputable attorney in town. In this version, your grandfather leaves the house, the contents of the house, and his savings account directly to you. He specifically excludes your father, stating that Tom has, and I am quoting here, ample means and a lack of spine." I let out a short, shocked laugh. That sounded like Grandpa. "But then," Mara continued, her voice dropping, "there is a codicil, an amendment. It is dated 3 weeks before he died." 3 weeks, I repeated. He was in the nursing home then. Monica told me he was completely incoherent. She said he didn't know his own name. "Exactly," Mara said. "This amendment revokes the original bequest. It states that due to your continued absence and estrangement, he is leaving everything to Thomas and Monica Hart to be administered for the benefit of the family." I felt the blood pound in my ears. I wasn't estranged. They blocked my calls. They physically prevented me from visiting. They manufactured the estrangement to justify the theft. "Riley, listen to me," Mara said, urgent. "The signature on this amendment? It is a mess. It looks like a seismograph during an earthquake. It is shaky. It trails off. And the witnesses? They are not lawyers or notaries. Their names are Brenda Miller and Paul Sutton." "I know them," I whispered. "They are on the welcoming committee at Monica's church. They are her friends." That is a conflict of interest so big you could drive a truck through it. Mara said, if we can prove he was medically incapacitated when he signed this, or if we can prove he was coerced, we can get the amendment thrown out. And if the amendment is thrown out, the original will stand, which means the house was yours, which means the money she stole was yours. And the credit cards? I asked. The loans? That is the leverage, Mara said. If we go to the police now, they might call it a civil dispute. But if we tie it to probate fraud, if we show she used a fraudulent will to steal the asset and then used your identity to cover the tracks, that is a RICO case waiting to happen. You need to come in. Anthony wants to meet you. 2 hours later, I was walking into the law offices of Vega and Associates. It was a small building, a converted brownstone with ivy climbing up the brick. Inside, it smelled of old paper and leather bindings. It was quiet, a respectful, heavy silence that commanded you to lower your voice. Anthony Vega was a man in his late 50s with graying hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every possible way a human being could be greedy. He didn't shake my hand immediately. He looked at the bruise on my temple. "Who did that?" he asked. His voice was gravelly but soft. "My stepmother." I said, 2 nights ago. "Because you asked about the money?" "Because I asked about the folder," I corrected. He nodded slowly and gestured for me to sit. Mara was there, sitting off to the side with a notepad. I told him everything. I told him about the dinner, the locked cabinet, the ladle, the years of gaslighting, the voicemails from Grandpa, the later box of debt. Anthony listened without interrupting. He leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "It is a compelling story, Riley," he said finally, "and I believe you. I have seen this pattern 100 times. The stepmother isolates the patriarch, controls the communication, alienates the heirs, and then rewrites history once the deceased can no longer speak. It is textbook." He leaned forward, his eyes sharpening. "But courts do not run on stories. They run on evidence. Suspicion is not enough. Knowing she is evil is not enough. We need to prove it." He held up a finger. "First, we need the medical records. We need to prove that 3 weeks before his death, Walter Hayes did not have the cognitive capacity to sign a legal document. If he was on heavy painkillers, if he had dementia diagnoses, that signature is void." He held up a second finger. "Second, we need to prove the isolation. You said they blocked your calls? We need phone records. We need logs from the nursing home showing who visited and who was turned away." He held up a third finger. "And third, we need the money trail. We need to trace exactly where that $450,000 went. If she moved it into an LLC, we need to pierce that corporate veil." He looked at me directly, but the most important thing? I need something that predates the fraud. "You said he left a folder?" "She took it," I said, bitterness coating my tongue. "She has it." Anthony sighed. "That is unfortunate. If she has a brain, she has already shredded it." I hesitated. I thought about the fishing rod case sitting on my kitchen table. I hadn't opened the inner lining yet. I hadn't told Mara about it. I was so used to hoarding secrets for survival that it was hard to let go. But looking at Anthony, this stranger who was looking at my case not as a family tragedy but as a puzzle to be solved, I realized I had to trust someone. "He might have left a backup," I said quietly. "Grandpa said he hid things where she wouldn't look. I found something else. I haven't opened it yet." Anthony's eyebrows shot up. "Then that is your homework. Riley, go home. Open it. If there is a letter, a note, a duplicate will, anything written in his hand before that amendment was signed, that is our silver bullet." He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. "We will take the case on a contingency basis," he said. "We get paid when you get your house back. But Riley?" I stopped at the door. "Yes?" He looked at the bruise on my face again. "Do not talk to them. Do not text them. Do not answer their calls. From this moment on, they are not your parents. They are the defendants. If they show up at your door, you call the police. You have to stop thinking like a daughter who wants an apology. You have to start thinking like a plaintiff who wants judgment." I walked out of the office into the cool evening air. The streetlights were just flickering on. I felt a strange weight in my pocket. The list of tasks Anthony had given me. Get the medical records. Get the phone logs. Find the evidence. It was a cold, clinical list. It stripped away all the emotion, all the years of crying in my bedroom, all the holidays spent feeling inadequate. To save myself, I had to look at Tom and Monica Hart and see them for exactly what they were, strangers who had broken into my life and stolen everything. I got into my car and drove home. I drove past the exit from my father's house without even glancing at it. I was going back to my apartment, back to the fishing rod. Grandpa Walt had prepared for this war. It was time for me to open the armory. I parked my car 3 blocks away, tucked behind a row of overgrown hedges that lined the perimeter of the community park. It was Wednesday night. Wednesday meant Bible study and community group for Monica and my father. They never missed it. It was their weekly opportunity to parade their piety in front of the neighbors and solicit sympathy for the burden of raising a difficult stepdaughter. I checked my watch. It was 6:45. They would leave at 7. I slouched low in the driver's seat, watching the house through the gap in the hedges. The rain had stopped, but the streets were slick and black, reflecting the streetlights like spilled oil. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that made my hands sweat. This was not just visiting, this was breaking and entering. At exactly 7 o'clock, the garage door rumbled open. My father's sedan backed out, the taillights cutting red streaks into the darkness. I waited. I watched them turn the corner at the end of the block. I waited another 5 minutes, just to be sure they hadn't forgotten a Bible or a casserole dish. Then I moved. I walked quickly down the sidewalk, keeping my head down, pulling my hood up to cover the bandage on my temple. The neighborhood was quiet. Blue television light flickered in the windows of the other houses. I reached the front porch and stood before the door. My hand trembled as I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key. It was a brass key, tarnished with age. I had kept it on my keychain since I moved out at 18. Mostly out of habit, or perhaps out of a subconscious hope that one day I would be welcomed back. Monica had asked for it back a dozen times, and every time, I had lied and said I lost it. I slid the key into the lock. For a terrifying second, it stuck. I held my breath, imagining Monica had changed the locks years ago, but then, with a gritty click, the tumbler turned. I pushed the door open and slipped inside, closing it softly behind me. The silence of the house was instant and oppressive. It smelled of lemon polish and stale air. It felt like walking into a museum exhibit where touching anything was forbidden. I didn't turn on the lights. The street lamps outside provided enough illumination, casting long skeletal shadows across the floor. I went straight to the dining room. My boots squeaked on the hardwood, and I winced, stopping to listen. The house groaned, the settling of timber, and my pulse spiked. I was an intruder in the place I grew up. I approached the glass display cabinet. It was empty. Monica had cleared it out. The shelves were bare, wiped clean of dust. The stack of folders, the binders, the brown envelope she had snatched that night, all gone. Of course she had moved them. She knew I had seen them. She probably had them locked in a safe deposit box or shredded by now. Panic flared in my chest. Had I risked arrest for nothing? I stood there in the dark dining room, trying to slow my breathing. Think, Riley. Think like Grandpa. I hide things where she hates to look. The fishing rod case in my apartment had been the first clue, but it had been empty of papers. It was a signal, a pointer telling me that he had a system. He knew Monica was a surface cleaner. She polished what people could see. She obsessed over appearances. Where did she hate to look? I moved through the house, my flashlight beam cutting a thin slice through the gloom. I checked the basement first. It was organized, labeled, boxes stacked with military precision. Monica had clearly conquered this space. Nothing here. I checked the garage. Same story. Tools hung on pegboards. No dust. No secrets. I went upstairs, my hand trailing on the banister. I walked past the master bedroom. The door was closed, and I didn't dare open it.
and went to the end of the hall, my old room.
Monica had turned it into a guest room. The walls, once covered in my posters and drawings, were now a neutral, lifeless beige. The bed was made with hospital corners. It looked like a room where nobody ever slept. But on the far wall, hanging slightly crooked, was a picture. It was a framed photograph of Grandpa Walt and me on a fishing trip when I was 10. It was the only artifact of my existence she hadn't thrown away, probably because it fit her narrative of being a sentimental family. I walked over to it. It was tilted to the left. Monica would never leave a picture tilted. She owned a laser level. I lifted the frame away from the wall. Taped to the back of the frame was a small, yellowed index card. I shined my flashlight on it. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. Grandpa's block letters. If she digs this deep, try the place she hates dusting most. W. I stared at the card. The place she hates dusting most. Monica dusted everything. She dusted the baseboards. She dusted the tops of the door frames. She dusted the light bulbs. Except, I remembered a summer day, years ago. Monica was screaming about the heat. She was screaming about the insulation. She had sent my father up to the attic to get the Christmas tree, refusing to go up there herself because she said the fiberglass made her itch and the dust ruined her clothes. "It is a filth trap," she had said. "I am not going up there. It ruins my hair." The attic. I looked up at the ceiling in the hallway. The hatch was there, painted over to blend in with the drywall. I dragged the desk chair from the guest room out into the hall. The legs scraped loud against the floor, a sound that seemed to echo like a gunshot. I froze, listening. Silence. I stood on the chair and reached for the pull cord. It was stiff, coated in layers of paint. I yanked it hard. With a groan of rusty springs, the attic stairs unfolded, sliding down like a tongue. A cloud of dust puffed out, dancing in the beam of my flashlight. I climbed. The air in the attic was hot and dry, smelling of old paper and fiberglass insulation. It was a cavern of shadows. Boxes were piled haphazardly, the one place in the house where Monica's obsession with order didn't reach. I crawled across the wooden beams, careful not to put my weight on the drywall between them. I swept the flashlight beam across the stacks, old luggage, a broken lamp, boxes labeled Xmas. And then, tucked far back in the corner, wedged behind a stack of old magazines, I saw it. It was an old red metal toolbox, the kind mechanics used in the 70s. It was covered in grime. I crawled over to it. It was wrapped in heavy-duty duct tape, sealed shut. I used my house key to saw through the tape. It took forever, the adhesive gumming up the metal. But finally, the lid popped open. Inside, wrapped in 2 layers of Ziploc freezer bags, was a thick brown folder. It looked exactly like the one I had seen in the dining room cabinet. The same size, the same color, but this one had a label written in thick, permanent marker. The real one. I sat cross-legged on the dusty insulation, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I unzipped the bag and pulled the folder out. I opened it. The first document was a last will and testament. I shined the light on the date. It was signed 3 years ago. The signature was firm, strong, Grandpa's real signature. I skimmed the text. I, Walter J. Hayes, being of sound mind, hereby leave my entire estate, including the property at 42 Maplewood Drive and all cash assets, to my granddaughter, Riley Hart. My breath hitched. He had left it to me, all of it. I specifically exclude my son, Thomas Hart, and his wife, Monica Hart, from this bequest, as they have adequately provided for themselves and have shown a distressing tendency to view family as a financial resource. I flipped the page. There were bank statements, copies of them, dating back 5 years. They showed a savings account with a balance of $80,000. They showed the mortgage on the house had been paid off in 1998. There was no debt. The underwater story was a lie. The medical bills story was a lie. Then, I found a document I didn't expect. It was a notarized letter, stamped and signed by a lawyer I didn't know. To whom it may concern. This letter serves to document that Monica Hart has been granted temporary administrative access to my checking account solely for the purpose of paying utility bills during my rehabilitation. She is expressly forbidden from accessing my credit, opening lines of credit in my name, or making changes to my estate plan. Any attempt to do so should be considered an act of fraud. He had anticipated it. He had known she would try to take over. He had created a legal paper trail proving that she was acting outside her authority. But it was the last thing in the folder that broke me. It was a handwritten letter on lined notebook paper. The date at the top was only 6 months before he died. The handwriting was looser here, shakier, written by a man who knew the end was coming. My dearest Riley, if you are reading this, it means I lost. It means I didn't make it out of that place to tell you myself. I know they are keeping you away. Monica tells me you are busy, or that you do not want to see me. But I know better. I know my girl. I know she is blocking the door. I am hiding this because I know what she is capable of. She looks at people and sees numbers. She looks at you and sees a vulnerability she can exploit. They think I'm confused. I let them think it. It is easier to hide things when the enemy thinks you are broken. I wrote the decoy folder to keep her distracted. I knew she would find it. I knew she couldn't resist opening a locked cabinet. But this box is for you. Riley, I am sorry I didn't protect you better when you were small. I thought keeping the peace would keep you safe. I was wrong. Peace with a predator is just slow digestion. Do not let them take your future. The house is yours. The money is yours. It is all I have to give you to make up for the years she stole. If she has turned you into an asset, if she has used your name, your credit, your life to feed her greed, then you use this folder. You use it to burn their lies to the ground. Finish the battle I am too old to win. Love, Grandpa. I sat in the dark attic, surrounded by dust and silence, and I wept. I didn't cry the way I had cried as a teenager, helpless, confused, sobbing into my pillow. This was different. This was a release of pressure. It was the grief of being loved so fiercely by a man who had died alone, and the rage of realizing how calculated the cruelty had been. He hadn't been senile. He had been a spy behind enemy lines. He had played the part of the confused old man so that he could smuggle out the truth to me. Peace with a predator is just slow digestion. I wiped my eyes with the sleeve of my hoodie. The tears mixed with the dust on my face, feeling gritty and raw. I closed the folder. I put it back in the Ziploc bag. I put the bag back in the metal toolbox. Then I paused. No, I wasn't leaving it here. I took the folder out of the box. I tucked it inside my jacket, zipping it up tight against my chest. I climbed down the ladder, my movements fluid and sure. I shoved the ladder back up into the ceiling. I put the chair back in the guest room. I hung the picture frame back on the wall, leaving it slightly crooked, just like I found it. Let her wonder. Let her think the ghost of Walter Hayes was haunting her. I walked out of the house, locking the door behind me with the brass key. The street was still empty. The rain had started again. A light, cold mist. I got into my car and placed the folder on the passenger seat. I rested my hand on it for a moment, feeling the thickness of the paper. I had the original will. I had the proof of solvency. I had the notarized restriction of power. And I had his blessing. I started the engine. Monica and Tom would be home from church in 10 minutes. They would walk into their perfect, clean house, oblivious to the fact that the bomb had already been armed. I pulled away from the curb, driving slow and steady. I wasn't going home to hide. I was going to make copies. Then I was going to Anthony Vega's office. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in my life, I had the ammunition. I did not sleep that night. I treated the brown folder like it was a crate of unstable explosives I had to transport across a minefield. As soon as I locked the door of my apartment, I went into operational mode. I didn't cry again. I didn't pace. I turned on my scanner and sat down at my desk, adopting the same numb mechanical efficiency I used when processing 1,000 shipping manifests at Northbridge. Page 1, scan, save. Page 2, scan, save. I created a digital fortress, I saved the files to my laptop's hard drive. Then I copied them to an external thumb drive, which I encrypted with a password that was 30 characters long, a random string of letters and numbers that had nothing to do with birthdays or anniversaries. Then I uploaded a third set to a secure cloud storage account I had created 5 minutes prior, using a burner email address Monica would never find. Anthony Vega had been clear during our first meeting. Assume they will destroy anything they can touch. I wasn't just preserving paper, I was preserving the truth. Every whir of the scanner felt like I was loading a round into a chamber. The original will, the bank statements showing Grandpa was solvent, the notarized letter restricting Monica's access, and finally, the handwritten letter from Grandpa. By the time the sun came up, turning the gray rain outside into a dull morning mist, I had 3 backups and the original sealed in a waterproof plastic sleeve. I drank black coffee, showered to wash the attic dust out of my hair, and put on the most professional blazer I owned. I wasn't going to the lawyer's office as a victim asking for help. I was going as a partner delivering the goods. At 9 in the morning, I walked into Vega and Associates. Mara was at the front desk. She looked tired, like she had been up late worrying. But when she saw the thick plastic envelope in my hand, her eyes sharpened. "Is that it?" she asked. "That is the smoking gun," I said. We went straight into Anthony's office. He was on the phone, but he hung up the moment I laid the folder on his mahogany desk. I sat down, my spine straight, my hands folded in my lap. "I found this hidden in the attic insulation," I said. "It was sealed in a toolbox. Monica doesn't know it exists." Anthony put on his reading glasses and opened the file. The room was silent. Save for the rustle of paper and the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner, I watched his face. Anthony was a man who had made a career out of stoicism, but when he got to the notarized letter, the one where Grandpa explicitly forbade Monica from accessing his credit, his eyebrows shot up. And when he read the handwritten letter, the one warning me about the slow digestion of a predator, he stopped. He read it twice. He took off his glasses and looked at me. "This changes the landscape," Anthony said. His voice was no longer just sympathetic. It was energized. "How?" I asked. "Before this, we had a probate dispute," he explained, tapping the papers. "We had a case of he said, she said regarding his mental state. But this letter? And this notarized restriction? This proves premeditation. It proves Walter knew she was a threat. It proves she acted against his express written wishes. This moves us from undue influence territory into criminal fraud territory." He pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and uncapped a pen. "Here is the strategy. Riley, we are going to hit them on 3 fronts simultaneously. We are going to overwhelm them." I nodded. "Tell me." "First," he said, writing rapidly, "we file a petition to reopen the probate case for the estate of Walter Hayes. We allege fraud, forgery, and the concealment of a valid will. We submit this original will to the court and ask for an immediate freeze on all estate assets. Second," he continued, "we file a civil complaint for conversion and breach of fiduciary duty. That covers the money she stole from the accounts and the house she sold out from under you." "And third?" I asked. "Third, we go to the Attorney General," Anthony said, his eyes hard. "We file a formal complaint for identity theft and financial exploitation of an elder. We hand them the credit card records Mara found and this notarized letter. We show them that she was opening accounts in your name and her name while claiming to be his caretaker." He looked at me. "This is the nuclear option. Riley, once we file these, there is no going back to Sunday dinners. This could send your stepmother to prison. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the ladle striking my temple. I thought about the later box of debt. I thought of Grandpa dying alone, thinking I had abandoned him. "I am ready," I said. "Good," Anthony said. "Now, ground rules. You are to have 0 contact with Thomas or Monica. None. If they call, you do not answer. If they show up at your apartment, you do not open the door. You call the police. You are the plaintiff now. Anything you say to them can be twisted. Let me be the voice." He paused, looking at my healing face. "We also need to document the violence. You said there was a nurse?
Sarah, I said, at Mercy Hospital. Go back there, Anthony instructed. Today, ask her if she remembers you. Ask her if she would be willing to sign a simple affidavit stating that you presented with injuries consistent with an assault and that you identified the attacker as a family member. We need to establish a pattern. This wasn't a one-time fight. This was an escalation of control. I left the office with a list of tasks that felt less like chores and more like mission objectives. My first stop was the hospital. It was 11 in the morning, a quiet time for the ER. I asked for Sarah at the nurse's station. 10 minutes later, she walked out, looking surprised to see me. "Riley?" she asked, looking at my forehead. "How is the head?" "Better," I lied. It still throbbed when it rained. "Sarah, I need a favor. I have hired a lawyer. We are going after them, not just for the hit, but for everything." I explained what I needed. Sarah listened, her face serious. She didn't hesitate. "I remember," she said firmly. "I remember you flinching when I touched your arm. I remember you saying, 'Stepmother, I will sign whatever you need.' I took notes in your chart. Riley, I flagged it as suspected domestic violence even though you didn't file a report. That is in the official record." That note was a golden ticket. It transformed my bruised face from a rumor into a documented fact. My next stop was the old neighborhood. I needed a witness who wasn't me, someone who had seen the timeline with their own eyes. I drove to the house of Mrs. Vikes, Gable, who lived directly across the street from Grandpa's old place. She was 80 years old, spent her days gardening, and missed absolutely nothing that happened on her street. She invited me in for tea. The house smelled of lavender and dust. When I asked her about the week after Grandpa died, she set her cup down with a clatter. "Oh, it was terrible," she said, leaning in, disrespectful. That is what it was. Walter wasn't even in the ground yet. It was the Saturday after he passed. I remember because I was pruning the hydrangeas. "What did you see?" I asked, pressing record on my phone app, having asked her permission. "A big moving truck," she said. "Not a professional one. A rental. That woman, your stepmother, she was out there directing traffic like a general. They were hauling things out. Furniture, boxes. I walked over to offer my condolences. You know, just to be neighborly." "And what did she say?" Mrs. Gable pursed her lips. She didn't even look sad. She looked manic. She told me, "We are clearing out the junk. The house is mine now, and I am not keeping this old trash." Mine, that is the word she used, not the family's. Mine. I thanked Mrs. Gable and left. That one word, mine, spoken days after the death, contradicted every filing Monica had made to the court claiming she was merely managing the debts. I drove back to the city to meet Mara at the law office for the afternoon debrief. She had been digging into the real estate records while I was chasing witnesses. She looked up from her computer screen when I walked in. Her face was grim. "I found the house," Mara said. "Monica said it was sold to pay debts." I said, "It was sold," Mara corrected. "But look at the buyer." She turned the monitor toward me. The deed transfer showed a sale date 2 months after Grandpa died. Seller, estate of Walter Hayes. Buyer, Blue Spruce Ventures, LLC. Sale price, $150,000. "That is impossible," I said. "That house is in a prime neighborhood. It is worth $450,000. Easy, even as a fixer-upper." "Exactly," Mara said. "It was sold for 1/3 of its value. That is fraud right there. You cannot sell estate assets for pennies on the dollar. But wait, look at who owns Blue Spruce Ventures." She clicked a few keys, pulling up the corporate registry. Blue Spruce Ventures, LLC. Registered agent, Paul Sutton. "The witness to the fake will," I said, "her church friend." "And look at the transaction history," Mara said, pointing to the bottom of the screen. 6 months later, Blue Spruce Ventures sold the property. Buyer, Thomas and Monica Hart. Sale price, $10. I stared at the screen. The audacity of it was breathtaking. They had laundered the house. They sold it cheap to a shell company controlled by a friend to get it out of Grandpa's name and out of my potential reach.
And then, once the dust settled, they transferred it back to themselves for the price of a sandwich.
They stole it, I said, my voice flat. They didn't just sell it, they stole it and tried to hide the body.
They were betting you would never look, Mara said. They were betting you would be too intimidated by the debt talk to check the public records.
I sat down in the chair opposite her. The pieces were all there. The medical incapacity, the forged will, the identity theft, the real estate laundering, the assault. It wasn't a family dispute. It was a criminal enterprise disguised as a suburban marriage. Anthony walked in, holding a thick stack of papers. "The petition is ready," he said, "and the affidavit for the Attorney General." He placed them in front of me.
"This is the point of no return. Riley," he said seriously, "once you sign this, you are accusing your father and stepmother of felonies. It will destroy whatever relationship is left."
I looked at the papers. I looked at the signature line. Plaintiff, Riley Hart. I thought about Tom, my father. I thought about how he sat at the dinner table, staring at his plate while Monica hit me with a ladle. I thought about the text message he sent me about the funeral. We handled it. He wasn't a victim. He was an accomplice. His silence was the soil in which Monica's greed grew. I picked up the pen. "I do not have a relationship left," I said. "I have a crime scene." I signed my name. The ink was dark and permanent against the white paper. Riley Hart. It felt like cutting a cord. The last tether that bound me to the idea of being their daughter snapped. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their reckoning. That evening, back in my apartment, I took the original folder, the one Grandpa had hidden in the toolbox, and I placed it inside a fireproof lockbox I had bought at the hardware store on the way home. I slid the box under my bed, pushing it all the way to the wall where the shadows were deepest. I sat on the floor, leaning against the mattress. I felt exhausted, drained to the marrow of my bones, but my mind was clear. I used to think love was soft. I used to think love was baking cookies and remembering birthdays and asking how your day was. And Grandpa did those things. He taught me to fish. He told me stories. But looking at that fireproof box, I realized that wasn't the measure of his love. The measure of his love was that he sat in a nursing home, dying, surrounded by enemies, and he spent his final breaths plotting a way to save me. He weaponized his own death to ensure I would have a life. He didn't just leave me an inheritance, he left me a sword. I closed my eyes. "Okay, Grandpa." I whispered into the dark room. "We are ready. Let them come." The fallout was instant, digital, and radioactive. I had expected a legal battle. I had expected silence. I had expected, perhaps, a sternly worded letter from a defense attorney denying the allegations. I was naive. I had forgotten that for Monica, truth was not a matter of fact. It was a matter of marketing. 48 hours after the sheriff served the papers to the house on Maplewood Drive, my phone began to vibrate. It started with a notification from Facebook, then another, then a deluge. I sat in the break room at Northbridge Relay Systems, holding my phone with trembling hands. Monica had posted a video. She was sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where she had hit me with a ladle less than a week ago. The lighting was soft. She was wearing no makeup, which was a calculated choice for a woman who wouldn't check the mail without lipstick. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She held a tissue in one hand. "Friends," she began, her voice cracking perfectly. "I do not usually bring personal matters to this space. We are a private family, but my heart is just broken today, absolutely broken." She paused to wipe a tear that wasn't there. "We have spent 20 years loving Riley. We took her in when her mother passed. We raised her like our own. We sacrificed our retirement to make sure she had a roof over her head. And today she served us with a lawsuit." She held up the court papers, shaking them for dramatic effect. "She is trying to take the house, our home. She is accusing us of terrible, hurtful things. And it is all because we told her we could not afford to give her $50,000 cash she demanded last week." I stared at the screen, my mouth open. I had never demanded cash. I had asked where the money went. "It hurts," Monica continued.
whispering now. To have a child you raised turn on you for money. We know she has struggled. We know she has issues. But to try to leave her father homeless? Please, just pray for us. And pray for Riley. Pray that she finds peace and stops this vendetta. The video had 3,000 views. And the comments? God, the comments. They were a scrolling wall of vitriol from people who had known me since I was a child. People from the church, neighbors. So ungrateful, wrote Mrs. Gable, the same woman who told me Monica called the house mine last week. I always knew she was trouble. Money changes people, wrote a deacon from their church. Stay strong. Monica, the truth will prevail. Some kids just want a handout, wrote a stranger. Kick her to the curb. It was a masterclass in narrative control. In 3 minutes, she had inoculated the entire community against the truth. She had turned my legal claim, which was backed by forensic accounting and forged documents, into the tantrum of a greedy, unstable daughter. I turned off my phone, feeling like I was going to be sick. Later that afternoon, my father called. I stared at the screen. Dad. Anthony had told me not to answer. You are the plaintiff now, he had said. But looking at the name, seeing the connection to the man who used to carry me on his shoulders, I felt a crack in my resolve. I picked up. Riley? His voice was ragged. He sounded like he had aged 10 years in 2 days. I didn't say anything. I just breathed into the receiver. You have to stop this, he said. He wasn't yelling. He sounded desperate, pleading. She is a wreck. Riley, the police were here. They were asking questions about the house sale, about the bank accounts. Do you have any idea what you have done? I did what Grandpa told me to do. I said, my voice flat. Don't bring him into this, Dad snapped, a sudden flash of anger cutting through the pity. He was confused at the end. You know that. You are dragging his name through the mud to get a payout. I am not the one who forged a signature. Dad. There was a silence on the line, a heavy, guilty silence. Look, he said, his voice dropping. We can fix this. You drop the lawsuit, you withdraw the complaint with the Attorney General, and we will figure something out. Maybe we can help you with some rent, but you have to stop. Once this goes to court, Riley, once you make us testify, there is no coming back. You will not have a father anymore. Do you understand? You are choosing money over your family. I gripped the phone so hard the plastic case creaked. I am not choosing money. Dad, I said, I am choosing the truth. And as for family? You made your choice when you watched her hit me and did nothing. You made your choice when you let her steal Grandpa's house. Riley, please. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I felt a phantom pain in my temple, a throbbing reminder of exactly what family meant in that house. But the assault didn't stop there. It followed me to work. The next day, the atmosphere at Northbridge was different. The warehouse floor, usually loud with banter and shouting, seemed to go quiet when I walked by. People looked away. At lunch, a girl from accounting named Jessica, who I had considered a work friend, slid her phone across the table to me. I think you should see this, she said quietly, before HR sees it. It was another post from Monica. This one wasn't a video. It was a text post, long and rambling, framed as a prayer request. Please pray for Riley's mental health. We have been so worried about her erratic behavior lately. She has been hurting herself. We saw bruises on her face last week that she couldn't explain, and then blaming others in her confusion. It is heartbreaking to watch a child succumb to the same instability her mother fought. We are trying to get her help, but she is lashing out. The room spun. She was using the bruise she gave me. She was taking the physical evidence of her abuse and twisting it into proof of my insanity, hurting herself, instability, and the lowest blow of all, referencing my mother. My mother didn't have instability. She had high blood pressure and a stressful job, but Monica was rewriting that history too, painting a genetic line of madness to discredit me. They are talking. Riley, Jessica said, pulling her phone back. People are saying maybe you shouldn't be supervising the floor if you are, having episodes.
I stood up. I couldn't breathe. The air in the break room felt thick and oily. I walked out. I walked straight out of the building, got into my car, and drove home. I sat on the floor of my apartment with the lights off. The sun went down, casting long shadows across the room, but I didn't move. I was losing. I had the documents, I had the will, I had the truth. But it didn't matter. Monica was winning the war of public opinion. She was isolating me, just like she had isolated Grandpa. She was turning me into a pariah. Maybe I should just stop. The thought was seductive. It offered an immediate release from the pressure. If I dropped the case, the posts would stop, the whispers would stop, I could move away. Start over in a new state where nobody knew the name Hart. I could let them keep the money. It was just money. Was it worth this feeling of being flayed alive in the town square? I felt small. I felt like the 13-year-old girl watching her mother's furniture be carried out to the curb. I am sorry. Grandpa. I whispered into the darkness. I am not strong enough. She is too good at this. I reached under my bed and pulled out the fireproof box. I intended to take the papers out and shred them, to just be done with it. I opened the lid. There sat the thick brown folder, the weapon I was too weak to wield. I pulled it out. As I did, a smaller, thinner envelope slid out from between the pages of the will. I hadn't noticed it before. It had been stuck to the back of the notarized letter. It was a plain white envelope, yellowed with age. The glue on the flap had dried out and popped open. On the front, in handwriting that made my heart stop dead in my chest, was written, "For Walt. Keep this safe for her." It wasn't Grandpa's handwriting. It was delicate, looped cursive. It was my mother's handwriting. My hand started to shake, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from a sudden, overwhelming shock. I pulled the letter out. The paper was thin, old stationery with a faint watermark. It smelled, impossibly, after all these years, of vanilla. I unfolded it. The date at the top was 1999, 2 months before the car accident that killed her. Dear Dad, I am writing this because I do not know who else to talk to. Tom will not listen. He is so enamored with Monica, so desperate to please her, that he refuses to see what is happening right in front of him. She is asking about the insurance again, not just the house insurance, but my life insurance. She made a joke yesterday, at least Tom thought it was a joke, about how much simpler things would be if the policy paid out. It made my blood run cold. Dad, I am scared. Not for me, maybe, but for Riley. If something happens to me, Monica will be the one in the house. I see the way she looks at Riley. She doesn't see a child. She sees competition for Tom's attention and a drain on the wallet. I have opened a small savings account at the credit union in the next town over. It is not much. Just $5,000 I scraped together from bonuses. It is in your name, but it is for her. Please, Dad, keep it secret. Do not tell Tom. He will tell her. If they ever turn me into the family emergency exit, if they ever use my absence to fund their lifestyle, please make sure Riley knows she doesn't owe them her future. I hope I'm just being paranoid. I hope this letter is just silly anxiety. But the brakes on the sedan felt spongy yesterday, and Tom said Monica took it to the mechanic, but there is no receipt. I'm going to take it in myself on Monday. Love, Sarah. I read the letter 3 times. The silence in my apartment changed. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of depression anymore. It was the charged, electric silence of a storm front moving in. The brakes felt spongy. Monica took it to the mechanic. My mother died because her car went off the road on a clear night. The police report said it was likely a mechanical failure or driver error. They never investigated it as anything else. Why would they? It was a tragedy. But my mother hadn't just died. She had been afraid. She had suspected. And Grandpa Walt, he had kept this letter. He had kept it hidden in the deepest part of his archives. Why hadn't he gone to the police? Because he had no proof, just a letter from a scared woman. And if he had accused them and failed, He would have lost access to me completely. He would have been cut off 10 years earlier. So he waited. He watched. He played the long game, enduring the woman he suspected of killing his daughter, just so he could be there to protect his granddaughter when the time came. A cold, hard rage settled into my chest. It was different from the anger I had felt about the money. The money was nothing. The house was nothing. This was blood. Monica hadn't just stolen an inheritance. She had terrorized my mother in her final months. She had created an environment of fear so palpable that my mother hid cash in a credit union 3 towns over just to ensure I would have a safety net. If they ever turned me into the family emergency exit, that was exactly what they had done. They used her death pay off their debts, to buy new furniture, to fuel their lifestyle. And then, when that money ran out, they tried to use me. I looked at the phone, sitting dark on the floor. Let them post the videos. Let them write the comments. Let the neighbors whisper that I am crazy. They had no idea what crazy looked like. I wasn't dropping the lawsuit. I wasn't settling. I was going to burn their entire world to ash, and I was going to use my mother's words as the lighter. I stood up. My legs felt steady. The trembling was gone. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I drank it in one long swallow. Then I picked up my phone. I didn't look at Facebook. I went to my contacts and found Anthony Vega. It was 11 at night. I didn't care. I texted him. I found another letter, from my mother. It establishes motive and suspicion of foul play regarding the accident. I am bringing it in tomorrow. I put the phone down. I looked at the window, where my reflection stared back at me against the dark glass. The bruise on my temple was fading, turning a sickly yellow-green. Monica wanted a fight? She wanted to drag family secrets into the light? Fine. She had forgotten the most important rule of digging graves. Make sure the people you bury are actually dead. My mother was speaking from the grave. Grandpa was speaking from the grave. And tomorrow, I was going to be their voice. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was smaller than I expected, with wood paneling that had darkened with age and fluorescent lights that hummed with a low, headache-inducing frequency. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white. To my left sat Anthony Vega, looking like a granite statue in a charcoal suit. To his left was Mara, organizing a stack of files with terrifying precision. Across the aisle, at the defense table, sat my family. Monica was putting on the performance of her life. She was wearing a soft, pastel blue cardigan, a color that screamed innocence and maternal warmth, and a small gold cross necklace that caught the light every time she dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. She looked fragile. She looked like the victim of a cruel, vindictive stepdaughter. Next to her, my father, Tom, looked like a man who had already been hollowed out. His suit hung loose on his frame. He stared at the table, refusing to look at me, refusing to look at the judge, refusing to look at anything real. The hearing was technically a preliminary injunction regarding the estate, but Anthony had warned me it would turn into a brawl. We were asking the court to freeze everything. To do that, we had to prove a likelihood of fraud. Monica's lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Henderson with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, stood up first. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, "this case is a tragedy, but not a legal one. It is a family tragedy. We have here a young woman, Ms. Riley Hart, who has unfortunately struggled with emotional stability since the death of her biological mother." He gestured toward me as if I were a broken vase. "Ms. Hart has projected her unresolved grief onto the only mother figure she has left. She is attacking Mrs. Hart, a woman who fed her, clothed her, and raised her, because she cannot accept that her grandfather simply chose to prioritize the stability of the household over a direct cash payout to a granddaughter he knew was volatile." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. Volatile. It was the word they used to dismiss my questions. Anthony placed a hand on my arm. Just a light touch. "Stay down," it said. "Wait." "Mr. Henderson continued,
The defense asserts that the codicil to the will is valid. Walter Hayes changed his mind in his final weeks because he was heartbroken by his granddaughter's absence. She abandoned him, Your Honor, and now she wants his money. It is that simple. He sat down, looking pleased with himself. Anthony stood up. He didn't stride. He didn't posture. He simply walked to the podium and placed a single document on the projector. Your Honor, Anthony said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that filled the room without shouting. The defense builds their entire narrative on two pillars: that Walter Hayes changed his mind, and that Riley Hart abandoned him. We intend to break both pillars right now. Exhibit A. The screen behind him lit up. It showed two signatures side by side. On the left was Grandpa's signature from the original will, dated 3 years ago. It was firm, angular, with a sharp loop on the W. On the right was the signature from the amendment, the codicil Monica had filed. It was a mess. The lines were shaky. The W trailed off into a flat line. It looked like the handwriting of a man who was either heavily medicated or having his hand guided by someone else. This amendment, Anthony stated, was signed 3 weeks before death. The witnesses were Brenda Miller and Paul Sutton. Neither is a notary, neither is a lawyer. Both are personal friends of Mrs. Hart from her church group. Mr. Sutton is also, coincidentally, the registered agent for the shell company that bought the deceased's house. We will get to that shortly. Monica shifted in her seat. Her pastel cardigan suddenly looked a little tight. But first, Anthony continued, let us address the claim of abandonment. The defense claims Ms. Hart never called. Exhibit B. The screen changed. It was a spreadsheet. Rows and rows of data. These are the call logs from Riley Hart's cell phone for the 12 months preceding Walter Hayes' death. Anthony said, highlighted in yellow are outgoing calls to the Hayes residence landline. 104 calls. That is an average of 2 calls a week. He clicked a button. And this, Your Honor, is the call log from the landline at the residence, controlled by Mrs. Hart. You will see that 98% of these calls were sent to voicemail or lasted less than 10 seconds. Furthermore, we have subpoenaed the records from the Happy Valley nursing facility. Another document appeared, a visitor log. The log shows that Riley Hart attempted to visit on 4 separate occasions. On each occasion, she was turned away at the desk because Mrs. Hart had placed her on a do not admit list, citing medical distress of the patient. Anthony turned to face Monica. Riley didn't abandon her grandfather. Mrs. Hart, you built a wall around him and told him she wasn't coming. That is not estrangement. That is isolation. And in probate law, isolation is the first step of undue influence. The courtroom was silent. The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, was writing furiously. Anthony wasn't done. The defense calls Ms. Hart volatile, he said, his voice hardening. They paint a picture of a loving stepmother dealing with a difficult child. Let us look at that love. Exhibit C. The photo of my face appeared on the giant screen. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The bruise was purple and black, swelling my temple, closing my left eye halfway. It was ugly. It was undeniable. This photo was taken 6 days ago at Mercy Hospital. Anthony said, we have a sworn affidavit from the attending nurse, Sarah Jenkins. In it, she states that Ms. Hart presented with these injuries immediately after a dinner at her father's house. Ms. Hart told the nurse she was struck with a kitchen ladle by her stepmother. Why? Because she asked to see a folder with her name on it. Anthony looked at the judge. This is not the injury of a clumsy fall. This is the injury of a desperate attempt to silence a beneficiary who was asking too many questions. Monica looked pale. She whispered something to her lawyer, but he just shook his head. Looking down at his notes, he knew the damage was done. The saintly mother mask had just been ripped off. Anthony called our expert witness, a forensic real estate auditor named Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lewis was dry, boring, and absolutely lethal. He walked the court through the sale of the house. Can you explain the transaction regarding 42 Maplewood Drive? Anthony asked. Certainly, Mr. Lewis said, adjusting his glasses. The property was sold by the estate to an entity called Blue Spruce Ventures for $150,000. This is approximately 30% of the market value. 6 months later, Blue Spruce Ventures transferred the deed to Thomas and Monica Hart for a consideration of $10.
And who owns Blue Spruce Ventures? Anthony asked.
Mr. Paul Sutton, Mr. Lewis replied. The same man who witnessed the will amendment. The judge looked up, her eyes narrowing. She looked at Monica. Monica was staring at her hands, twisting a ring on her finger.
Thank you, Anthony said. He walked back to our table and picked up the thick brown folder, the one from the attic. He held it like it was a holy relic. Your Honor, Anthony said quietly, we have established fraud. We have established violence. We have established theft. But the defense might still argue that this is all a misunderstanding, that perhaps Walter Hayes really did want to leave everything to the couple who isolated him. He pulled out the letter from my mother, the one I had found the night before. This is a letter, Anthony said. It was written by Sarah Hart, Riley's biological mother, 2 months before she died in a car accident. It was found hidden in Walter Hayes's personal archives. He unfolded the yellowed paper. I will not read the personal sections, Anthony said, but I will read this paragraph. He cleared his throat. If they ever turn me into the family emergency exit, if they ever use my absence to fund their lifestyle, please make sure Riley knows she doesn't owe them her future. I am afraid. Dad, I am afraid Monica will view Riley not as a daughter, but as a walking loan application. The phrase hung in the air. Walking loan application. It was so specific, so prophetic. It cut through the legal jargon and touched the raw nerve of the truth. My mother had seen it coming. She had seen the credit card applications, the identity theft, the exploitation, 20 years before it happened. I looked at my father. Tom was weeping. He wasn't sobbing loudly. He was shaking, tears running silently down his gray cheeks. He knew, deep down, he had always known, and hearing his dead wife's voice from the grave, predicting exactly what he had allowed to happen, finally broke him. Anthony sat down. Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Thomas Hart to the stand. Mr. Henderson tried to object. Irrelevant, he shouted. Overruled, the judge snapped. Mr. Hart, take the stand. My father walked to the witness box. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He swore to tell the truth, his voice barely a whisper. Mr. Hart, Anthony asked, standing near the jury box, did you read the amendment to the will before you signed the probate filing? Tom looked at Monica. She was glaring at him, her eyes wide and manic, willing him to lie. Mr. Hart? Anthony pressed. No, Tom whispered. Speak up, please. No, Tom said, his voice cracking. I didn't read it. Monica handles the paperwork. She told me. She told me Dad wanted us to have the house so we could take care of Riley. She said it was better this way. And the sale of the house? Anthony asked. Did you know it was sold to a shell company and then back to you for $10? I just signed what she gave me, Tom said, putting his head in his hands. I just signed. She said it was for tax purposes. She said we were saving the family. And the credit cards in Riley's name? Anthony asked. The loans? Tom looked up. He looked at me. His eyes were full of a terrible, pathetic apology. I didn't know about the cards, he said softly. I swear. Riley, I didn't know she went that far. I thought we were just borrowing a little time. He looked at Monica. You told me it was legal. Monica, you told me Dad wanted this. Monica stood up. You coward, she screamed. Sit down, the judge roared, slamming her gavel. You are a weak, pathetic man, Monica yelled at my father. Her face twisted and ugly. I did everything for us. I kept a roof over your head. I managed your debts. And this is how you thank me? By siding with that ungrateful brat? Bailiff, the judge barked. 2 officers moved toward Monica. She sat down, heaving, her chest rising and falling rapidly.
Anthony looked at me. He didn't smile, but he gave an almost imperceptible nod. It was over. The cross-examination hadn't just revealed the crime, it had destroyed the family dynamic that allowed the crime to exist. The judge adjusted her robes. She looked at the papers in front of her, then at the defense table. "I have heard enough for a preliminary ruling," she said. Her voice was ice-cold. "Based on the evidence presented, specifically the discrepancy in signatures, the conflict of interest regarding the witnesses, and the testimony of Mr. Hart admitting to a lack of knowledge regarding the documents he filed, I am ordering an immediate freeze on all assets belonging to the estate of Walter Hayes." She looked at Monica. "Furthermore, I am freezing the personal accounts of Thomas and Monica Hart pending a forensic audit. The deed transfer of the property at 42 Maplewood Drive is hereby suspended." She paused, removing her glasses. "And Mrs. Hart? Based on the evidence of identity theft, forgery, and the assault documented by the hospital, I am referring this transcript and all exhibits to the District Attorney's Office for immediate review regarding criminal charges. You are ordered to surrender your passport to the clerk before you leave this building." The gavel banged. It was a sharp, final sound, like a gunshot ending a war. Monica slumped in her chair. For the first time, she looked small. The power was gone. The narrative was gone. The money was gone. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I didn't collapse. Tom tried to catch my eye as he stepped down from the witness box. He reached a hand out, trembling, Riley. I turned my back on him. I looked at Anthony. "Thank you," I said. He began packing his briefcase. "We are not done, Riley. This is just the injunction. Now the criminal case starts. But tonight, nobody is touching your grandfather's money." I walked out of the courtroom. The air in the hallway felt different. It was lighter. I had walked in there as a victim, a daughter, a girl who was afraid of the dark. I walked out as the owner of my own life. I had used the folder. I had used the letter. I had used the truth. And for the first time in 20 years, the house of cards Monica built had finally, spectacularly, fallen down. 3 days later, the mail carrier delivered a thick white envelope from the county clerk's office. It sat on my kitchen table for an hour before I gathered the courage to open it. The paper was heavy, the seal embossed with the state crest. I sliced it open with a dull knife. It was the written judgment. The words were dense and legalistic, but the meaning was as clear as a bell ringing in a quiet valley. The court finds the codicil dated October 12th to be invalid due to lack of capacity and undue influence. The last will and testament dated 3 years prior is hereby reinstated. The deed transfer of the property at 42 Maplewood Drive is voided ab initio. All assets are to be returned to the sole beneficiary, Riley Hart. And at the bottom, a typed note that chilled me even as it vindicated me. The court refers the evidence regarding Monica Hart to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. I put the paper down. I expected to feel a surge of triumph. I expected to feel like the hero in a movie who pumps their fist as the credits roll. Instead, I felt a heavy, hollow quietness. It was a clean feeling, like a room that has been scrubbed with bleach, sterile, safe, but smelling faintly of chemicals. I sat there, drinking lukewarm coffee, and I grieved. I didn't grieve for the money or for the house. I grieved for the family I had spent 30 years trying to invent in my head. I grieved for the version of my father who would have protected me. I grieved for the fact that to save myself, I had to destroy the only home I had left. The victory wasn't happy. It was just necessary. It was the difference between surviving a surgery and enjoying a vacation. That evening, the rain had returned, tapping a frantic rhythm against the window pane. I was packing a box, just books and a few clothes, preparing for the move back to Grandpa's house. Then, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't the polite knock of a neighbor. It was a rapid, desperate pounding. I froze. I knew that knock. I walked to the door.
my socks sliding on the linoleum. I looked through the peephole. Tom and Monica stood in the hallway. Monica looked like a wreck. Her hair was unwashed, pulled back in a severe bun. She wore no makeup, and her face was splotchy and pale. My father stood behind her, looking at the floor, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. I took a deep breath. My first instinct, the instinct of the frightened 13-year-old girl, was to hide, to turn off the lights and pretend I wasn't home. But I wasn't 13 anymore. I was the owner of 42 Maplewood Drive. I was the plaintiff who had won. I unlocked the deadbolt, but I didn't undo the chain. I opened the door 3 inches. The metal chain pulled taut, a gold line drawn in the air between their world and mine. "Riley," Monica gasped. She pushed her face toward the gap. "Open the door. We need to talk." "I am not opening the door." "Monica," I said. My voice was calm. It surprised me how steady it sounded. "What do you want?" "You know what I want," she hissed. Her voice was jagged, vibrating with panic. "I got a call from a criminal defense lawyer today. Do you know what they are saying? They are talking about prison. Riley, prison, for me." "You forged a will," I said simply. "You stole a house. That is what happens." "I did it for this family," she shrieked, slamming her hand against the doorframe. "I did it to keep us afloat. Your father is old. He needs care. I was managing the assets so we wouldn't end up on the street. And now you are sending me to jail? You are sending your own mother to jail?" "You are not my mother," I said. Monica flinched as if I had slapped her. "You have to fix this," she demanded, switching tactics from anger to begging. "You have to call the prosecutor. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you gave me permission to sign the papers. If you withdraw the complaint, they might drop the charges. Please, Riley, do not do this to us." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had terrorized my mother, who had isolated my grandfather, who had hit me with a ladle and then told the internet I was crazy. "I didn't send you anywhere. Monica," I said, "you sent yourself. You signed the papers. You sold the house. You spent the money. I just turned on the lights." "Riley," my father spoke up. His voice was trembling. I looked at him through the narrow gap. He looked gray, old. "Please, honey," he said, "can't we handle this internally? We can pay you back. It might take time, but we will sell the cars. We will get a loan. Just don't let them take her away. We can be a family again. We can put this behind us." The audacity of it took my breath away. He was still trying to negotiate. He was still trying to force me back into the role of the silent, compliant daughter who cleans up the mess so he doesn't have to be uncomfortable. "There is no internal anymore. Dad," I said, "you burned that down when you let her rewrite Grandpa's will." "I am your father," he whispered. "Then act like it," I said. "Stand up and take responsibility." I looked back at Monica. Her eyes were hard again. The begging hadn't worked, so the venom was returning. "I will make a deal with you," I said. They both froze, hope flaring in their eyes. "I will not lie to the prosecutor," I said firmly. "I will not withdraw the evidence. I will not say I gave you permission. That would be perjury. And I am not going to prison for you." Their faces fell. "But," I continued, "if the court asks for a victim impact statement, if they ask me regarding sentencing, I will tell them that I do not seek maximum vengeance. I will tell them that if you plead guilty, if you return every cent you stole, and if you leave me alone forever, I will not push for the maximum sentence." "That is it?" Monica spat. "That is your offer? Mercy?" "That is more than you gave Grandpa," I said. "You ungrateful little wretch," Monica sneered, her true face finally breaking through the panic. "You are nothing without us. You hear me? You are a lonely, miserable girl with no family. We gave you everything. Without us, you are just a ghost in that big house." I smiled. It was a small, sad smile, but it felt genuine. Grandpa and Mom made sure that would never be true. I said, "I looked at them one last time. The woman who stole my childhood. The father who let it happen. They stood on the dirty hallway carpet.
trapped in a prison of their own making.
"Goodbye," I said. I closed the door. I didn't slam it, I just pushed it shut until the latch clicked. It was a soft sound, a final sound.
I heard Monica screaming on the other side. I heard my father crying. But the sound was muffled, distant, like noise coming from a television in another room.
I slid the deadbolt home.
2 weeks later, I stood in the living room of 42 Maplewood Drive.
The house was empty. Monica and Tom had been evicted 3 days prior. They had taken their furniture, the beige leather sofa, the heavy dining table, the locking cabinet, and left the rooms bare. The walls still held the faint outline of where their pictures had hung. Ghost squares on the paint.
But the air was different. I had opened every window in the house. The autumn breeze blew through, carrying the scent of dry leaves and rain, chasing out the smell of potpourri and expensive polish. Sunlight streamed across the hardwood floors, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I had one box with me. It sat on the floor in the center of the room. I knelt down and opened it. Inside was the brown folder, the original will, the letters, the evidence of a war that had spanned 2 generations. I walked over to the built-in desk in the corner, the one spot in the house Monica had never managed to rip out. I opened the bottom drawer. I placed the folder inside. I wasn't hiding it. I wasn't burying a secret. I was filing it away. It was history now. It wasn't a weapon anymore. It was just a record of how I got here. I locked the drawer and put the key in my pocket. I walked to the back door and stepped out onto the porch. The backyard was overgrown. The grass was high, and the rhododendron bushes where I used to hide as a child were wild and untamed. I looked at the spot on the driveway where Grandpa used to teach me to ride my bike. I could almost see him there, holding the back of the seat, his laugh rumbling in the summer air. I looked at the spot near the garage where my mother used to park her car, where she would wave to me when she came home from work. For 20 years, Monica had tried to erase them. She had tried to paint over them with beige paint and lies. She had tried to evict their memories just as she had tried to evict me. But the house remembered, and now I was here to listen. I sat down on the porch steps, the wood cool against my jeans. I was alone. I had no parents. I had a small savings account and a house that needed a lot of work. The road ahead would be lonely at times. I knew that. But as I watched a cardinal land on the fence post, a flash of bright red against the gray sky, I realized something profound. Revenge wasn't about watching Monica get handcuffed, though that would likely happen. Revenge wasn't about seeing my father cry in court. Those were just consequences. Real revenge was this. It was sitting on my own porch, breathing my own air, in a life that nobody could take away from me. It was breaking the cycle of abuse so that it stopped with me. It was the simple, quiet act of surviving the fire and planting a garden in the ash. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold, clean air of Maine. I was Riley Hart. I was the granddaughter of Walter Hayes. I was the daughter of Sarah Hart. And I was finally home. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I really hope it resonated with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Riley's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so more people can hear this story.